After the end of the Clone Wars, the Galactic Empire nationalized the remaining assets of the Confederacy of Independent Systems, including what was left of the droid army. Many of these droids were melted down, but some were actually adopted into the Imperial military and made to serve alongside stormtroopers. These units included the infamous Droidekas and DS-D1 Dwarf Spider Droid, both of which had proved incredibly effective against Republic forces during the war. But the Empire's use of these units begs the question of why they didn't use other highly effective droid units as well. Consider, for example, the IG-100 Magnaguard. Those droids were proven Jedi killers and some of the most effective combat droids ever produced. Wouldn't they have been useful as bodyguards in the Empire? And if so, why weren't they used? In this video, we're going to be answering those questions.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
The IG-100 Magnaguard was developed by Holo-1 Mechanicals at the request of General Grievous, who wanted battle droids that could rival his Isvoshra, the cadre of the Kaleesh warriors he used to travel with. The droids were built to his exact specifications, and they ended up being just as effective in combat as the droid general himself. They were incredibly fast, strong, and maneuverable, and they could take a hell of a lot of punishment, as backup logic modules allowed them to keep fighting even after losing their heads. Furthermore, they were able to learn and replicate the combat techniques of their enemies on the fly, much like Grievous could, making them all the more lethal. Grievous wanted his Magnaguards to be Jedi killers. During the Clone Wars, he trained the droids in all 7 forms of lightsaber combat, making them familiar with Jedi battle techniques. He also equipped them with lightsaber-resistant electro-staffs to allow them to more easily bring down those pesky space wizards. At other times, Magnaguards were seen using blaster rifles, grenades, rocket launchers, radiation weapons, drones, and a number of built-in gadgets, including built-in tow cables, personalized cloaking systems, magnetized limbs, and miniature seeker missiles. All told, these droids kicked some serious tail. They certainly proved themselves during the Clone Wars, killing multiple Jedi and gaining a reputation as being worse than droidekas. Separatist leaders used them often, with Grievous having a small army of the droids to himself, each with their own unique numbers, paint jobs, and personalities. These droids were all but unmatched, both by other combat droids and by organics as well. Only the most skilled combatants were capable of defeating one of them in a fair fight. With all that said, why couldn't the Empire find a use for Magnaguards? As General Grievous proved, they made excellent bodyguards after all. At the least, Emperor Palpatine could have used Magnaguards as his personal guards. They would have been an improvement over the Imperial Royal Guard, right? Well, it's not quite that simple. There are quite a few possible reasons why Palpatine opted not to use the Magnaguards actually. The first possible reason to consider is Palpatine's prejudices. Under the Empire, non-human species and droids were widely mistreated and distrust of them was commonplace. Palpatine passively sponsored these prejudices, and thus it could easily be assumed that he shared them. He did not, however. He simply used prejudice as a control tactic, as it turned potential enemies of his against each other. Additionally, he didn't care much about keeping appearances when it came to Imperial humanocentrism either. He would treat droids or non-humans better when it suited him, as the promotion of Grand Admiral Thrawn evinces. He probably just didn't want a guard of humans on principle then, so there had have to have been other reasons. A more likely cause would be numbers. There were at least 400 royal guards, and it's possible that there were thousands more, all utterly devoted to the Emperor. There weren't nearly as many Magnaguards lying around after the end of the Clone Wars, nor would it have been cheap to make that many. It's possible that there had once been that many Magnaguards in operation, but most of the droids had been destroyed by the end of the conflict. After the Battle of Coruscant, most of the Magnaguards that weren't part of Grievous's cadre had been destroyed, and even their numbers were beginning to thin. As we mentioned earlier, Grievous's personal bodyguards had their own personalities, paint jobs, and numbers, as Grievous wanted them to be as individual as possible. Much of the time, Grievous would neglect to repair damage the droids suffered in battle to allow them each to become more unique, and as a result, several Magnaguards were missing eyes or even arms by the conflict's end. This lack of emphasis on maintenance meant that the Hollow One didn't bother with manufacturing many replacement parts, another contributor to the droid's eventual shortage. Many of Grievous's droids were destroyed in the Battle of Coruscant, while the rest fell in the Battle of Utapau. Those Magnaguards that remained weren't quite as skilled as those of Grievous's guard, but they were still formidable combatants. Nonetheless, they didn't have their hands on training that Grievous had given his personal droids, and they were still few in number as well. There definitely weren't thousands of them, and if Palpatine wanted to use them as royal guards, he would have had to commission more. But this was something he easily could have done, so we suspect this wasn't the answer either, or at least the whole answer. Another thing to consider is the fact that the royal guards were actually a lot more skilled than you might have thought. They were chosen from among the most skilled and fanatically loyal members of the Stormtrooper Corps and underwent brutal training regimens, which had extremely high casualty rates. Their final test was a duel to the death with another guard candidate, while Palpatine himself watched from above, ensuring that at least half of the candidates that trained to join the Royal Guard perished in the attempt. In one class of 42, all but 2 were known to have been killed. As a result, the Royal Guards were some of the most skilled warriors in galactic history. They were trained in a number of martial art forms, including the difficult but deadly Ichani style, and they were also trained to use many varieties of melee and ranged weapons. Royal Guard training taught a number of other skills as well, such as techniques to keep the Emperor stable if something would happen to him. Members of the Guard even had their own language, which nobody outside of the organization, not even Palpatine, understood. Royal Guards were also incredibly dedicated to the Emperor. They were indoctrinated with the belief that Palpatine was beyond fault and that his orders were unquestionable and always right. Guardsmen forsook even their names, identifying themselves not as individuals but as servants of the Emperor to whom they dedicated their very existence. It wasn't enough for Palpatine that his guards would die for him in a heartbeat, he wanted them to live for him and no one else as well. The Royal Guard's loyalty to the Emperor was borderline religious, and it was unthinkable that anyone from the Guard would ever betray him. That leads us to what we believe is the answer to our opening question. Palpatine opted to found the Royal Guard instead of just using Magnaguards because their skill levels were comparable and the Royal Guard were just more reliable. Sure, they couldn't keep fighting after their heads got cut off, but odds were that nobody would ever be in a position to cut their heads off in the first place. They couldn't shoot Seeker missiles out of their backs, but they didn't need to. The various added perks of the Magnaguards just weren't something the Emperor needed. What he needed was reliability, something the Guards had more of. After all, droids could always be reprogrammed and made into unwilling assassins, while Royal Guards would never betray the almighty Sheev. Droids could easily be disabled or weakened by EMP weapons, while Royal Guards had no such weaknesses. Droids could malfunction or suffer power failures or suffer from logic bugs as a result of a lack of memory wipes, while Royal Guards would always stand strong as long as the Emperor had need of their services. Furthermore, at the end of the day, no droid could match the sheer zealous devotion the Royal Guards had to the Emperor. In the films, we don't get to see much of the Imperial Royal Guard. They sort of just spend their time standing around or being hurled into walls by Yoda. Among Star Wars fans, they're mentioned as punchlines more than anything else. But Royal Guardsmen were anything but jokes. They were the equals, if not the superiors of Magnaguards when it came to combat prowess, and in non-combatant roles, the Royal Guards were easily better than their droid counterparts. There's a reason Palpatine chose to have these guys go with him wherever he went, including to his private office or to bed. They truly were the best of the best. So that's why we think Emperor Palpatine chose not to use Magnaguards as his personal protectors. But what do you think? Do you have your own theory? Feel free to post your thoughts in the comment section below. And just before you run off to the next suggested video, guys, make sure you check out some of our links in the description below, including our new channel called The Braved. We go all through history to check out some of the most badass individuals of all different eras. And if you're more into music, we also have our Relax Jack music channel, where we use a lot of the music posted there on the videos posted here. And also, if you do want to get access to a behind the scenes Discord server where you can chat to myself and the team who makes these videos, as well as some exclusive content on the actual Patreon, make sure you consider donating there. And if you just want to join our wider community, check us out on our Geetsly's gaming network and our Geetsly's Discord. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.